Imagine proposing marriage to a complete stranger in a crowded restaurant, not as a joke, but as the most desperate act of hope you've ever attempted. Alexander Pierce, a 34-year-old CEO worth $300 million, kneels before a woman he's never met, holding a ring that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. He thinks he's found the one person who might save him from a life mapped out by everyone except himself. But she, Emma Carter, a skeptical graphic designer who's been burned by love too many times, thinks it's a prank, a bet, maybe even a cruel social media stunt. What begins as confusion spirals into something neither of them expected, a collision between two wounded hearts, both too afraid to trust, both desperate to believe that lightning can strike in the most impossible moment. Stay with me until the end, because this story will shatter everything you think you know about love at first sight. And if you've ever wished someone would fight for you the way no one ever has, hit like and subscribe. This one's going to break you open and put you back together. The rain had been falling for 3 hours in downtown Manhattan, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon and blurred headlights. Inside Marcella's, an intimate Italian restaurant tucked between two glass towers, the world felt warmer, softer, wrapped in candlelight and the murmur of Friday evening conversations. Emma Carter sat alone at a corner table, her phone face down beside an untouched glass of wine. She'd promised herself she wouldn't check it, wouldn't refresh her messages, wouldn't hope that David, her ex of 3 months, would finally text her back after ghosting her following 2 years together. She was 29, talented, independent, and so tired of feeling like she wasn't enough. Her friend Rachel had dragged her here, insisting she needed to get back out there. But Rachel was now 20 minutes late, probably caught in traffic or distracted by her own chaotic love life. Emma didn't mind. Solitude had become her safest companion. She reached for her wine, letting the glass hover near her lips, when the restaurant door opened with a gust of cold air and rain-scented wind. And then she saw him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked tailored to perfection, but slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running. His dark hair was damp, falling messily across his forehead. His eyes, a striking shade of grey-blue, swept across the restaurant with an intensity that made several diners glance up from their meals. Alexander Pierce had exactly 11 minutes before his entire life imploded. He'd left the board meeting early, his phone buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from his mother, his lawyer, his publicist. The family ultimatum had been delivered that morning with surgical precision. Marry someone respectable within 6 months, or lose control of the company his grandfather built. His mother had already selected 3 candidates, daughters of business partners, women who smiled with calculated warmth and saw him as a trophy, not a person. He'd walked out of that meeting feeling like a man being buried alive. And then, while sitting in traffic, rain hammering against the car window, he'd seen this restaurant. Warm light, real people. A life that wasn't orchestrated by committees and expectations. He'd told his driver to stop. He'd walked in without a plan, without logic, driven only by a desperate, reckless thought that had been building in him for months. What if I just chose differently? What if I chose something real? His eyes landed on her. The woman sitting alone in the corner, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass, her expression somewhere between melancholy and defiance. She wore a simple navy dress, her dark hair pulled back loosely, a few strands falling around her face. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She wasn't performing. She was just there, present, real. Something in Alexander's chest cracked open. He moved toward her table before his rational mind could intervene, his heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration he hadn't felt since he was a kid jumping off the high dive for the first time. Emma sensed him approaching and looked up, startled. Their eyes met. For 3 seconds, The restaurant disappeared. Then Alexander did something that would change both their lives forever. He knelt. Right there, beside her table, rain still dripping from his jacket, he lowered himself onto one knee, pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, the engagement ring his grandmother had left him, the one he'd been carrying for weeks like a talisman of hope, and opened it. The diamond caught the candlelight, scattering prisms across the white tablecloth. Emma's wine glass slipped from her fingers, caught at the last second by her other hand. "Marry me." His voice was rough, urgent, barely above a whisper, yet somehow it cut through every other sound in the room. Emma stared at him, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Around them, conversations stopped. Phones came out. A woman gasped. "I'm sorry, what?" Emma's voice came out strangled, disbelieving. "I know how this looks," Alexander said, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I know you don't know me. I know this is insane, but I need you to hear me, really hear me, just for 1 minute." Emma's heart was racing, her face flushing hot. Was this a prank? Some elaborate YouTube stunt? She glanced around for hidden cameras, for someone laughing, for any sign that would explain this absurdity. "Is this a joke?" she managed, her voice shaking between laughter and panic. "No." The word came out raw, stripped of everything except truth. "This is the most serious thing I've ever done in my life." The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Every eye was on them. Emma felt dizzy, caught between the urge to run and the strange, inexplicable pull of his gaze. Those grey-blue eyes that looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. "I don't even know your name," she whispered. "Alexander. Alexander Pierce." The name meant nothing to her. She didn't follow business news, didn't care about Forbes lists or corporate dynasties. To her, he was just a stranger, a very intense, possibly unhinged stranger, kneeling beside her table with a ring that probably cost more than her car. "I'm Emma," she said automatically, then immediately wondered why she'd told him. "Emma." He said her name like he was memorizing it, like it mattered. "I know this seems crazy. I know you have every reason to think I'm insane or dangerous or running some kind of scam, but I promise you, this is real. I'm real, and I'm asking you to take the biggest leap of faith anyone has ever asked of you." Emma's hands were trembling. Part of her wanted to laugh at the sheer audacity, the theatrical absurdity of it. Another part, a part she'd thought David had killed, felt something flutter to life in her chest. Hope. Dangerous, foolish hope. "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why me? You don't know anything about me." Alexander's jaw tightened, and for a moment she saw past the desperate confidence to something deeper. Pain, loneliness, a hunger for something authentic in a world that had given him everything except what mattered. "Because," he said quietly, "you're the first person I've seen in years who looks like they're still fighting to believe in something, and I need to be near someone who hasn't given up." The words hit Emma like a physical thing, reaching into the exact place where she kept her own battle scars hidden. She should say no, should laugh him off, walk away, call security. Every rational instinct screamed at her to protect herself from whatever this was. But something else whispered, what if? What if just once she said yes to the impossible? What if this stranger saw something in her that no one else had bothered to look for? What if? "I need an answer," Alexander said softly, and she could hear the vulnerability beneath the urgency. "Please." Emma looked at the ring, at his face, at the entire restaurant holding its breath. And in that moment, suspended between disbelief and wonder, she had absolutely no idea what she was about to do. Does she say yes to a stranger's proposal, or does she walk away from the most surreal moment of her life? Stay with me." Emma's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her mind was a hurricane of conflicting thoughts, each one louder than the last. This was insane. This was romantic. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of reckless, beautiful thing she'd stopped letting herself dream about after David had taught her that dreams were just preludes to disappointment. Alexander remained kneeling, his eyes never leaving hers, and she realized with a jolt that he was trembling too. Whatever this was, publicity stunt, mental breakdown, genuine impulse, he was just as terrified as she was. That scared vulnerability in his face did something to her defenses. "I can't just," she started, then stopped, her voice catching. "People don't do this. This isn't how life works." "I know." His voice was barely audible now, meant only for her despite the audience of strangers surrounding them. But maybe that's exactly why it should. The restaurant manager was approaching, looking concerned and confused, probably wondering if he should intervene or simply let this bizarre theater play out. A woman at the next table had her phone raised, recording everything, her eyes wide with vicarious excitement. Emma felt the weight of all those watching eyes, all those strangers who would turn this moment into content, into gossip, into something that would follow her forever regardless of what she chose. And suddenly, she was angry. Not at Alexander exactly, but at the universe, at the unfairness of it all. That her most private moment of confusion was being broadcast to people who would judge her either way. That she couldn't even process this impossible situation without it becoming entertainment. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Alexander's face fell, resignation flooding his features as he began to lower the ring box. "Outside," Emma said sharply. "If you want an answer, we're doing this outside, away from the cameras." Something like hope flickered across his face. He rose quickly, closing the ring box, and followed her as she grabbed her coat and purse and pushed through the restaurant toward the door. The cold rain hit them both like a slap. Emma walked half a block before stopping under the awning of a closed bookstore, finally turning to face him. Her hair was already soaked, rainwater streaming down her face, and she didn't care. Let the universe see her messy and real for once. Alexander stood a few feet away, rain plastering his expensive suit to his shoulders, and he looked nothing like a multimillionaire CEO. He looked like a man who'd jumped off a cliff and was only now realizing there might not be anything to catch him. "Talk," Emma demanded, her voice sharp with emotion. "You have 5 minutes to explain what the hell just happened in there, and it better be the truth, because I'm 2 seconds away from calling the police or a psychiatric hospital or both." He flinched but nodded. "My name is Alexander Pierce. I'm the CEO of Pierce Industries, my family's company. $300 million, 60 countries, 20,000 employees." He said it without pride, almost with distaste. "This morning my mother informed me that unless I marry someone appropriate within 6 months, the board will vote me out and hand control to my cousin. They've already selected 3 candidates, women I've met exactly twice each, women who want the name and the money and the influence." Emma wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, listening. "I've spent my entire life doing what was expected. The right schools, the right career, the right social circles. And I've been empty, Emma. Completely empty, going through motions, smiling at charity galas while feeling like I'm drowning." His voice cracked. "Today I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't marry someone I don't love just to keep a company my grandfather built. I couldn't spend the rest of my life pretending. So you decided to propose to a random woman in a restaurant." Emma's tone was incredulous, but softer now. "Not random." He stepped closer, rain running down his face. "I saw you sitting there and you looked like you understood. Like you were fighting the same battle, trying to believe in something real while the world keeps proving you wrong. I saw someone who hadn't given up, and I thought..." He stopped, struggling. I thought maybe if I chose something true, something that made absolutely no sense except to my heart, maybe I could remember who I was before they turned me into a function. Emma's anger was dissolving into something more complicated. She recognized the pain in his words because she'd felt it herself, that exhaustion that comes from pretending, from performing a version of yourself that fits other people's expectations while your real self suffocates. You can't just hijack someone's life because you're having an existential crisis, she said quietly. I know it was selfish and reckless and completely unfair to you. He looked down at the wet pavement. But I'm asking anyway, because maybe you need this too. Maybe you're just as tired of playing it safe. Maybe you've been hurt and you've built walls and you've convinced yourself that protecting your heart matters more than using it. Emma felt tears mixing with the rain on her face. He was right. God help her, he was right. She'd been so careful since David, so controlled. Dating men who were safe and predictable and emotionally unavailable, because at least then she could see the disappointment coming. She'd convinced herself that caution was wisdom, that shutting down was survival. But standing here in the rain with this stranger who'd just blown up both their lives, she felt more alive than she had in years. "What are you actually asking me?" she whispered. Alexander pulled the ring box from his pocket again, holding it between them like an offering. "Marry me." "Not for real, and not at first, just help me. Give me 6 months. Let me introduce you as my fiancé, let the board see that I've made my choice, and in return, I'll give you whatever you need. Money, freedom, time to figure out what you really want. No strings, no pressure, and when the 6 months are up, we walk away clean." "A business arrangement." Emma's voice was flat. "A partnership," he corrected. "Between two people who are both drowning and might be able to help each other breathe." She stared at the ring box, her mind spinning through implications and consequences and the 1,000 ways this could destroy her. But underneath all that rational fear was something else, a whisper that sounded like her own voice from years ago, before disappointment had taught her to be small. What would the brave version of you do? "I need to think," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time." "No," she cut him off. "I mean, I need to think right now. Give me 3 minutes of silence." Alexander nodded and stepped back, giving her space. Emma turned away, facing the rain-soaked street, her mind at war with itself. The practical part catalogued every danger. He could be lying, manipulating, dangerous. This could be a trap. She could end up hurt, exploited, used. But another part, the part that had been slowly dying under layers of caution, whispered something different. "You're 29 years old, and you feel 40. You play it safe and it doesn't protect you anyway. David still left. Your heart still broke. What if just once, you chose the terrifying thing?" She thought about her empty apartment, her predictable job, her careful life that felt more like a waiting room than an existence. She thought about Alexander's eyes in that restaurant, the raw desperation in them, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. She thought about the fact that she hadn't felt this awake, this present, this absolutely terrified and exhilarated since she was a teenager. 3 minutes passed. Emma turned back to face him. He was still standing there, soaked through, shivering slightly, watching her with the expression of a man whose entire future balanced on whatever came out of her mouth next. She held out her left hand. 6 months, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. A clean contract. No games. No lies. And if at any point I want out, I walk away with enough money to start over somewhere new. Alexander's hands shook as he opened the ring box. Deal. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. An impossible coincidence that felt like the universe whispering that maybe, just maybe, some things were meant to be. They stood there in the rain, two strangers who just bound their lives together in the most reckless act either had ever committed, and Emma felt something long dormant crack open inside her chest. Fear, hope, the beginning of something that would either save them both or destroy everything they thought they knew about love. She said yes. But as the ring settles on her finger, both of them realize this was the easy part. Now they have to figure out how to survive what comes next. The contract arrived at Emma's apartment 72 hours later, delivered by a man in a suit who looked like he'd never smiled in his life. She'd spent those 3 days in a fog of disbelief, staring at the ring on her finger, a flawless diamond that caught light like captured starfire, and wondering if she'd actually lost her mind. She'd called in sick to work, ignored Rachel's increasingly frantic texts, and sat on her couch replaying that night in the rain over and over, searching for the moment when reality had split open. Alexander had given her his number, his lawyer's contact, and a promise. Take your time reading everything, change anything you want, this is your choice. Now the contract sat on her coffee table, 47 pages of legal language that somehow made their insane arrangement feel both more real and more surreal. She read it 3 times. The terms were shockingly fair, generous even. 6 months as his fiancée, public appearances as needed, separate bedrooms in his penthouse, a substantial monthly allowance, and at the end, regardless of circumstances, $2 million and a clean separation. No intimacy clauses. No control over her personal life, just partnership. The only requirement that gave her pause was a confidentiality agreement. She couldn't tell anyone the truth. Not Rachel, not her family, not anyone. To the world, this had to look real. Emma signed it at midnight, her hand trembling, feeling like she was signing away one life and stepping into another. She texted Alexander a photo of her signature. His response came immediately. "Thank you. I'll send a car tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bring whatever you need. The rest we'll figure out together." She didn't sleep that night. The penthouse was nothing like she'd imagined. She'd expected cold luxury, marble and glass, and the kind of sterile perfection that looked like a magazine spread. Instead, Alexander's home felt lived in, almost warm. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, but the furniture was comfortable rather than showy. Books lined one entire wall, their spines cracked from actual reading. A piano sat in the corner, sheet music scattered across its surface. Alexander met her at the door, dressed casually in jeans and a grey sweater, looking younger and more uncertain than he had in the restaurant. "Your room is down the hall," he said quietly, leading her through the space. "Private bathroom, walk-in closet. I had some basics brought in, but we'll get whatever else you need." Emma followed him, clutching her single suitcase, feeling impossibly small in this vast space. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. Soft grey walls, an enormous bed with white linens, a window seat overlooking the park. It was beautiful, impersonal. "Take your time settling in," Alexander said. "No pressure, no expectations. Just make yourself at home." He started to leave, then hesitated in the doorway. "Emma, I know this is overwhelming, but I meant what I said. This is a partnership. Your comfort matters. Your boundaries matter." "Okay?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. When he left, she sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself cry. Not from sadness exactly, but from the sheer enormity of what she'd done. The first 2 weeks were strange, tentative, like two ghosts learning to share the same space. Alexander left for work early and returned late. They'd pass each other in the kitchen, exchange careful pleasantries, then retreat to their separate corners of the penthouse. He never pushed, never invaded her space, kept a respectful distance that should have felt reassuring, but somehow made her lonelier. Emma spent her days exploring the apartment, reading his books, staring out at the city, and trying to figure out who she was becoming. She'd quit her job. Alexander had insisted she didn't need to work, and honestly, she'd hated it anyway. Graphic design for a corporate firm that treated her like a printer with hands. Now she had time and freedom, and absolutely no idea what to do with either. One evening she found Alexander at the piano, playing something melancholy and beautiful. She stood in the hallway listening, watching his shoulders move with the music, and saw something in him she recognized. The loneliness of someone who'd learned to fill silence with anything except vulnerability. He sensed her presence and stopped playing. "Sorry. Did I wake you?" "No. I couldn't sleep." She moved into the room, drawn by something she couldn't name. "That was beautiful. What was it?" "Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major." He looked down at the keys. "My grandmother taught me. She said music was the only language that couldn't lie." Emma sat beside him on the bench, leaving careful space between them. "Play something else?" He did, and for 20 minutes the distance between them softened slightly, held together by notes that said everything they couldn't yet speak aloud. The first public appearance came 3 weeks in, a charity gala for childhood literacy, one of Alexander's regular obligations. His stylist had brought evening gowns for Emma to choose from, and she'd selected a simple black dress that made her feel elegant rather than costumed. In the car, Alexander was tense, his jaw tight. "They'll ask questions," he warned. "How we met, how long we've known each other. We need a story." They crafted it together during the drive. Her chance meeting at the restaurant, instant connection, love at first sight, the kind of fairy tale that would make society pages swoon and his mother's selection committee irrelevant. "Just stay close to me," Alexander said as they pulled up to the venue. "And if it gets overwhelming, squeeze my hand twice, we'll leave." Emma's heart was pounding as they stepped onto the red carpet. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Alexander's hand found hers, warm and steady, and she held on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. Inside, the ballroom glittered with wealth and power. Women in diamonds and men in tuxedos, all watching as Alexander Pierce introduced his mysterious fiancée to New York's elite. His mother appeared within minutes, a tall, elegant woman with Alexander's eyes but none of his warmth. "So you're the girl from the restaurant?" Her smile was sharp as glass. "How unexpected." Emma felt herself shrinking under that gaze, all her insecurities flooding back. But then Alexander's arm slid around her waist, pulling her closer. "Her name is Emma, Mother, and she's the best thing that's ever happened to me." The words were part of their act, Emma knew that, but the way he said them, and with such quiet conviction, made something flutter dangerously in her chest. They moved through the evening, performing their romance, dancing together while everyone watched. Alexander's hand on the small of her back, his breath warm near her ear as he whispered the names of people approaching. The careful tenderness that was supposed to be fake, but felt increasingly real. During their third dance, Emma looked up at him. "You're good at this, the acting." His eyes met hers and something flickered there, something that made her breath catch. "What makes you think I'm acting?" The question hung between them, dangerous and electric. Emma's heart stumbled. This wasn't part of the contract. This confusion, this heat building where there should only be business arrangement. This terrifying awareness that every time he touched her, even casually, her body responded like it knew something her mind was desperately trying to deny. She pulled back slightly, needing space, needing air. "I need the restroom." She escaped to the ladies' room, gripping the marble counter, staring at her reflection. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes too bright. She looked like a woman falling, and that wasn't part of the deal. When she returned to the ballroom, Alexander was talking to a stunning blonde woman who touched his arm with easy familiarity. They looked perfect together, matched, appropriate, exactly the kind of couple his mother would approve of. Something cold and sharp twisted in Emma's stomach. Jealousy, absurd, inappropriate jealousy over a man who wasn't actually hers. She turned away, needing escape, but Alexander had already seen her. He excused himself immediately, crossing the room to her side. That was Christine, old family friend, nothing more. "You don't owe me explanations," Emma said, hearing the brittleness in her own voice. "This isn't real, remember?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "Maybe we should talk about that." "About what?" "About the fact that this stopped feeling like pretending somewhere between the piano and tonight." Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to deny it, to hide behind the safety of their contract. But standing there with his eyes burning into hers, she couldn't. "We can't," she whispered. "That wasn't the agreement." "Agreements can change. Not this one, not when I don't know what's real and what's just convenient." She saw hurt flash across his face, quickly masked. Before either could say more, his mother reappeared with several board members, and they were pulled back into performance, into the careful dance of appearing perfectly in love, while everything underneath grew impossibly complicated. That night, lying in her beautiful, lonely bedroom, Emma stared at the ring on her finger and wondered what she'd actually agreed to, and whether she'd survive it with her heart intact. The line between pretending and feeling is blurring faster than either of them expected. And in a relationship built on a lie, the truth might be the most dangerous thing of all. The breaking point came on a Wednesday afternoon, 6 weeks into their arrangement. Emma had spent the morning at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, sketching in a notebook, something she hadn't done since college, when she'd still believed her art might matter. The freedom Alexander's money provided had given her space to remember forgotten parts of herself, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying to feel those dormant dreams stirring back to life. She returned to the penthouse around 2, expecting it to be empty as usual. Instead, she found Alexander's mother sitting in the living room like a queen holding court, flanked by 2 women Emma vaguely recognized from the gala, members of the Pierce Industries board. Alexander stood by the windows, his posture rigid, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Emma." His mother's voice was ice wrapped in silk. "How lovely. We were just discussing your background." Emma's stomach dropped. "Mother, that's enough," Alexander started, but Margaret Pierce cut him off with a raised hand. "No, darling. If this girl is going to bear our family name, we deserve to understand exactly who she is." She turned her sharp gaze back to Emma. "You're a freelance graphic designer, no college degree, no family connections. You lived in a 500-square-foot apartment in Queens before my son rescued you from obscurity." The words were delivered like surgical strikes, each one designed to diminish, to reduce Emma to something small and shameful. "You looked into my background." Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Of course we did. Due diligence." Margaret smiled without warmth. "And what we found was concerning. A string of failed relationships, a career going nowhere, mounting credit card debt. Tell me, dear, when my son proposed to you in that restaurant, did you even hesitate? Or did you see dollar signs and say yes before he finished the question?" The accusation hung in the air like poison. Emma felt her face burning, every insecurity she'd ever carried suddenly exposed under fluorescent lights. She wanted to defend herself, to explain, but her throat had closed around words that wouldn't come. Alexander moved across the room with barely contained fury. "Get out!" Margaret blinked, genuinely surprised. "Excuse me? I said get out." All of you. This is my home, and you have no right. We have every right. One of the board members stood, his expression condescending. We represent the company's interests, Alexander, and this arrangement raises serious questions about your judgment. A hasty engagement to someone completely unsuitable, someone who clearly saw an opportunity. Stop. Alexander's voice cracked like a whip. You don't know her. You don't know anything about what we have. What you have? Margaret laughed, cruel and cutting. You have a transaction, darling. A girl smart enough to recognize when a desperate man is willing to pay for companionship. Don't mistake convenience for love. Something inside Emma shattered, because Margaret was right. That's exactly what this was, a transaction, a business deal, a convenience. Emma had signed a contract for $2 million and told herself it was partnership. But standing here under the weight of these accusations, she couldn't distinguish anymore between what was real and what she'd been paid to perform. You're right, Emma heard herself say quietly. Alexander turned to her, his expression stricken. Emma, don't... No, she's right. Emma's voice was hollow, distant. I did say yes too quickly. I am completely unsuitable. And whatever this is, she gestured between them, it's not real. It never was. She pulled the ring from her finger. The diamond felt heavy, accusing. Emma. Alexander's voice broke on her name, raw with something that looked terrifyingly like actual pain. But Emma couldn't stay, couldn't breathe, couldn't exist for one more second in this space, where everything she felt was tangled up with what she was being paid to feel. She set the ring on the coffee table and walked toward the door. Wait. Alexander reached for her arm, but she pulled away. 6 weeks, I'll wire back a prorated amount. Her voice was mechanical, professional. Consider the contract terminated. I don't care about the money. Emma, please. But she was already gone, fleeing down the hallway into the elevator. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall until she was out of that building, away from his eyes that had looked at her like she mattered when she was just another problem his money could solve. Emma returned to her old apartment, unchanged and waiting like a shrine to her previous life. Her landlord had kept it rented to someone else, but her friend Rachel, finally clued into some version of what had happened, helped her find a tiny studio in the East Village. Emma moved in with her single suitcase, the same one she'd brought to Alexander's penthouse, and tried to pretend the last 6 weeks had been a dream. She blocked his number after the first day, when he'd called 16 times. She deleted social media after the second day, when photos of their breakup hit gossip sites with headlines like "Multi-millionaire bachelor back on market" and "Cinderella story ends in disaster." She spent the third day crying on Rachel's couch, finally telling her friend everything. The proposal, the contract, the way she'd started to forget which feelings were real and which were purchased. "So you fell for him," Rachel said gently. "I fell for the idea of him. There's a difference." Is there? Emma didn't have an answer. The money arrived in her account a week later, not a prorated amount, but the full $2 million, along with a note in Alexander's handwriting. You earned every penny. You gave me 6 weeks of feeling like myself. That's worth more than any contract. Emma stared at that note for an hour, tracing the loops of his handwriting, and felt something crack wider in her chest. 2 weeks after leaving, Emma was working at a small design firm in Brooklyn, a scrappy startup that actually cared about creativity, when her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. "Emma, it's Christine Waverly. We met at the gala." The blonde woman who touched Alexander's arm with easy familiarity. "I know this is unexpected, but I need to talk to you about Alexander. Can we meet for coffee?" Every instinct told Emma to say no, to protect herself. to stop reaching for something that had only ever been a mirage, but that dangerous whisper of hope that had gotten her into this mess was still alive, still whispering. Okay. They met at a quiet cafe in Soho 30 minutes later. Christine was just as beautiful in casual clothes as she'd been in evening wear, but up close, Emma could see kindness in her eyes, not calculation. "I'm not here to convince you to go back to him," Christine said immediately. "I'm here because you deserve to know the truth, and Alexander is too proud or too scared to tell you himself." Emma's heart hammered. What truth? That proposal? In the restaurant? It wasn't random, and it wasn't just about his mother's ultimatum. Christine leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Alexander has been in therapy for 2 years, trying to figure out how to break free from his family's control. That night, he'd just come from a session where his therapist challenged him to do one thing, just one, that was purely for himself, something true. Emma's breath caught. "He saw you sitting there, and he told me later that you looked like someone who understood loneliness, who was fighting the same battle he was, trying to stay human in a world that wants to turn you into a function. The proposal was insane, yes, impulsive and reckless, but it wasn't calculated, Emma. It was the first honest thing he'd done in years." "Then why did he let me sign a contract?" Emma's voice shook. "Why did he make it a business arrangement?" "Because you needed it to be." Christine's eyes were sad and knowing. "You never would have said yes otherwise. You would have thought it was a joke or a trap. The contract was protection, for you more than him, a way to let you take the leap without having to trust something as terrifying as belief." Emma felt tears sliding down her face. "I don't know what's real anymore." "That's the point, none of us do. Love is always a risk, always a leap. Alexander just made his leap very, very public." Christine reached across the table, squeezing Emma's hand. "He hasn't been to the office in 2 weeks. His mother is furious, the board is circling, and he doesn't care. He told them all to go to hell and locked himself in that penthouse playing piano and probably dying inside." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've known Alexander since we were kids, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you that night at the gala." Christine stood, leaving money for the coffee. "What you do with that information is up to you. But you should know, he's not waiting for you to come back. He thinks he ruined your life. He thinks you're better off without him." She walked away, leaving Emma sitting alone with the truth she'd been too scared to see. That night, Emma sat in her tiny studio apartment, staring at Alexander's note, at the contract she'd kept, at the life she'd tried to return to that no longer fit. Her phone sat on the table, still blocking his number. Outside, the city hummed with a million other stories, a million other people taking leaps or playing it safe, and Emma realized that the scariest thing wasn't that she'd fallen for Alexander. It was that she'd fallen for herself, the version of herself that was brave enough to say yes to impossible things. The question now was whether she was brave enough to say it again. She walked away to protect her heart. But what if the greatest protection was actually letting herself fall? Emma stood outside Alexander's building at 7 in the morning, watching the sunrise paint the glass towers gold and rose. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, her finger hovering over the intercom button, paralyzed by the enormity of what she was about to do. 3 times she'd almost walked away. 3 times that whisper, the one that sounded like the bravest version of herself, had pulled her back. She pressed the button. Silence stretched for so long she thought maybe he wasn't home, or maybe he'd seen her on the security camera and decided he didn't want to see her after all. Then his voice came through, rough and exhausted and achingly familiar. "Emma?" Just her name, nothing else. But she heard everything in it. Surprise, hope, fear, longing. "Can I come up?" Another pause. Then the door buzzed open. The elevator ride felt endless. Emma watched the numbers climb, her reflection in the polished steel doors showing a woman who looked both terrified and determined. She dressed carefully that morning, not the expensive clothes from their 6 weeks together, but her own jeans and sweater, her own face without the armor of makeup. If she was going to do this, she needed to do it as herself. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Alexander stood across the room by those floor-to-ceiling windows, backlit by morning sun. He looked thinner, shadows under his eyes, his hair longer and unkempt. He wore sweatpants and an old t-shirt, nothing like the polished CEO she'd met in that restaurant. He looked real, devastatingly, beautifully real. "Hi," she said, her voice barely audible. "Hi." He didn't move closer, didn't reach for her, just stood there drinking her in like a man who'd been dying of thirst. "I didn't think I'd see you again. I wasn't sure you'd want to." "Want to?" A sound escaped him, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Emma, I've spent 2 weeks trying to figure out how to breathe without you. Want doesn't begin to cover it." The rawness in his voice nearly broke her. "I talked to Christine." Alexander's expression shifted, understanding, then something like resignation. She should have, because I needed to hear what you were too scared to tell me yourself." Emma took a step closer. "Why didn't you tell me the proposal wasn't about the ultimatum, that it was about choosing something true?" "Because it sounded insane, because you already thought I was crazy, and telling you it was even more impulsive, even less rational, would have made it worse." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Because the truth was terrifying, Emma. The truth was that I saw you and felt something I've never felt, and I didn't know how to explain that without sounding like I'd lost my mind." "Maybe you did, maybe we both did." "Maybe." His eyes met hers, searching. "Why are you here?" The question hung between them, enormous and unavoidable. Emma took a breath, then another, gathering courage. "Because I left for the wrong reasons. I left because your mother made me feel small and I believed her. I left because I was scared that what I felt was just the money, the lifestyle, the fantasy. I left because distinguishing between what was real and what was contract became impossible, and that terrified me. And now," his voice was barely a whisper, "now I realize that's what love always is. Impossible to quantify, impossible to prove, always a leap into something that might destroy you." She moved closer, close enough to see the way his chest rose and fell with unsteady breaths. "I don't need the contract, Alexander. I don't need the money or the penthouse or any of it. But I need to know if we stripped away everything except this, except us standing here right now, would you still choose me?" The question seemed to hit him physically. "Emma." He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face with a tenderness that made her heart stutter. "I chose you the moment I saw you. Every single day since has just been me trying to be worthy of that choice. The contract, the money, all of it, those were just ways to convince you to stay long enough for me to prove that what I felt wasn't temporary or convenient or purchased. It was real. God, Emma, it was the realest thing I've ever felt." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and his thumbs brushed them away. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Good. Me too. That means this matters. I don't know how to do this, how to trust this." "Neither do I." His forehead touched hers, their breath mingling. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe love isn't about knowing. Maybe it's about choosing each other anyway, every day, even when it's scary." Emma's hands found his chest, feeling his heartbeat rapid and strong beneath her palms. "I fell in love with you," she said, the words tumbling out like confession. Somewhere between the piano and the gala, and every quiet morning we passed each other in this apartment, pretending we weren't falling apart. I fell in love with you, and I didn't know if it was real or if I'd just convinced myself because the alternative, that I'd sold 6 months of my life for money, was too painful to accept. It was real. His voice was fierce, certain. Everything you felt was real, Emma. I saw it. I felt it too. How do you know? Because love isn't something you can fake. Not the way you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching. Not the way you played with the ring when you were nervous. Not the way you laughed at my terrible jokes and called me on my defenses and made me feel seen for the first time in my entire life. She was crying fully now, her body shaking with the release of weeks of suppressed emotion. Alexander pulled her against him, wrapping her in arms that felt like safety, and coming home and every risk worth taking. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth from the beginning. I'm sorry I let you feel like any part of this was transactional. I'm sorry my mother hurt you and I didn't protect you better. I'm sorry I ran." Emma's voice was muffled against his chest. "I'm sorry I didn't trust what we had enough to stay and fight." They stood there holding each other as morning light filled the penthouse, two people who'd taken the most reckless leap imaginable and were only now beginning to understand what they'd actually found. Finally, Emma pulled back enough to look up at him. "So what now?" Alexander smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks, boyish and hopeful and heartbreakingly vulnerable. "Now we start over. No contract, no timeline, no pressure, just us, figuring this out together, taking it slow or taking it fast or taking it however feels right." He paused. "If that's what you want." "What about your mother? The board? The ultimatum?" "I quit." Emma's eyes widened. "You what?" "2 days after you left, I resigned as CEO, signed over my shares to a trust that'll sell them to someone who actually wants to run a corporation." His expression was lighter than she'd ever seen it, unburdened. "I don't want that life anymore, Emma. I want to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for someone else's expectations. And I want to do that with you, if you'll let me." "But the company was your whole life." "No, it was my whole prison. You showed me the difference." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've got enough money that we'll never have to work if we don't want to. But more importantly, I've got time. Time to find out what actually matters. Time to fall in love properly, without contracts or arrangements. Time to build something real." Emma felt something unfurl in her chest, not the terrified hope of their first weeks together, but something steadier, stronger. Trust. "I don't want your money," she said softly. "I want to build my own life, my own career. I want to know that what we have exists independent of financial security or convenience." "Then that's what we'll do." His smile widened. "I'll get a regular job. We'll split rent on a normal apartment. We'll figure out how to be normal people falling in love like normal people do." "A multi-millionaire working a regular job." She laughed through her tears. "That'll be interesting. I've always wanted to try bartending." "You're insane. Only about you." The kiss, when it finally came, felt like everything their first 6 weeks should have been. Unchoreographed, unpurchased, unplanned. Just two people choosing each other with full hearts and terrified courage. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexander pressed his forehead to hers. "Move back in with me. Not as part of an arrangement, just because I sleep better when you're here. Because the apartment feels empty without your sketches on the counter. Because I want to wake up every morning and have coffee with you and figure out how to build a life that's actually ours." Emma thought about her tiny studio, about the life she'd tried to return to that no longer fit. She thought about safety versus happiness, caution versus courage. "Okay," she whispered, "but I'm paying half the rent." Alexander laughed, the sound rich and joyful. Deal. They found each other through chaos and contract. Now they'll discover if love built on truth can be even stronger than love built on need. The next 3 months felt like learning to breathe in a new atmosphere. Alexander kept his word about building something real. He sold the penthouse, too full of memories of pretending, he said, and they found a modest 2-bedroom in the West Village, exposed brick, creaky floors, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. It was perfect. He didn't get a bartending job, but he did start volunteering at a youth center in Brooklyn, teaching piano to kids who couldn't afford lessons. Emma watched him come alive in those weeks, watched him discover a version of himself that had nothing to do with board meetings or family legacies. She took the money from their arrangement and invested it in opening a small design studio with Rachel, focusing on non-profits and artists who couldn't afford traditional agencies. It felt right, using what Alexander had given her not to escape life but to build something meaningful. They learned each other slowly, without performance. She discovered he was terrible at cooking, but insisted on trying anyway, filling their kitchen with smoke alarms and laughter. He learned she was grumpy before coffee and liked to work in complete silence, sketching for hours while he read beside her. They had their first real fight on a Tuesday evening, something stupid about whose turn it was to buy groceries, and Emma had stormed out, terrified that this was it, the moment the fantasy collapsed into ordinary dysfunction. She'd walked 3 blocks before Alexander caught up to her, breathless. "I'm sorry, you were right. It was my turn and I forgot, and I got defensive because I hate feeling like I'm failing at normal life." Emma had stared at him, this man who'd given up millions to find authenticity, now apologizing on a street corner about groceries. "That's it? No dramatic exit? No cold silence for days?" "That's it." He'd looked confused. "Were you expecting something else?" Yes. Everyone I've ever dated punishes me for being angry." Something had shifted in his expression then. Understanding, sadness. "Emma, I don't want to be like everyone else you've dated. I want to be the person who proves that disagreeing doesn't mean abandoning, that being angry doesn't make you less lovable, that we can be messy and human and still choose each other." They'd gone grocery shopping together, and Emma had felt something settle in her chest, the beginning of actual security, not the purchased kind, but the earned kind. Alexander's mother showed up unannounced on a Saturday morning in late spring. Emma opened the door to find Margaret Pierce standing in the hallway, perfectly dressed and utterly out of place in their bohemian building. "Mrs. Pierce." Emma kept her voice neutral, her hand tight on the doorframe. "May I come in?" Every instinct screamed to say no, to protect the fragile peace they'd built, but Alexander appeared behind Emma, his hand finding the small of her back. "It's okay," he murmured. "Let her in." They sat in the small living room, Margaret perched uncomfortably on their second-hand couch, looking around at the space with thinly veiled distaste. "You've certainly simplified," she said finally. "We've gotten real," Alexander corrected, his tone firm but not unkind. "What do you want, Mother?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment, and Emma saw something she'd never expected in that polished facade. Uncertainty. "I came to apologize." The words hung in the air like foreign objects. To Emma, Margaret turned to face her directly. "What I said to you that day was cruel and unfair. I made assumptions about your character based on nothing except my own fear and prejudice." Emma's throat tightened. "I've spent 3 months watching my son become someone I barely recognize. He's happy, genuinely happy. He smiles at strangers. He laughs. He's present in a way he never was when he was running the company." Margaret's voice cracked slightly. "And I realized that everything I thought I wanted for him, the legacy, the power, the status, meant nothing if he was dying inside." Alexander's hand found Emma's, squeezing gently. "You gave him permission to be himself," Margaret continued, now looking at Emma with something that might have been respect. "And whether it started as an arrangement or a convenience, what you've built together is clearly real. I was wrong to question it. I was wrong to hurt you. And I'm sorry." Emma felt tears threatening but held them back. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." Margaret stood, smoothing her skirt. "I won't intrude further, but Alexander, if you'd consider having dinner with your father and me sometime, just dinner, no agenda, we'd like that." "I'll think about it," Alexander said, walking her to the door. When Margaret left, Emma finally let the tears fall. Alexander pulled her close and she cried against his chest, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of having one more piece of her fear dismantled. "You okay?" he murmured. "Yeah, just... I never thought she'd apologize. Never thought she'd see me as anything except someone trying to take advantage. She was protecting what she thought mattered. Now she knows better." He kissed the top of her head. "We all learned better." That night, they lay in bed together, the window open to let in the sounds of the city and the warm spring air. Emma traced patterns on Alexander's chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Giving up everything? The company, the money, the life you knew?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I regret the years I wasted pretending. I regret not finding you sooner. But giving it up? Never." He turned to face her, his eyes serious in the dim light. "Emma, I have everything that matters. I have purpose, I have peace, I have you. The rest was just noise. What if I hadn't come back that morning? What if I'd stayed away? Then I would have spent the rest of my life knowing what real felt like and trying to find it again. But I wouldn't have gone back to who I was before. You changed me fundamentally. Whether you stayed or left, I could never pretend again." Emma felt her heart expand with something too big for words. "I love you," she whispered. "Not the fantasy version or the multimillionaire or the package deal. Just you. This you. The one who burns dinner and teaches kids piano and makes me feel like being myself is not just enough, but everything." Alexander's smile was radiant. "I love you too. Every stubborn, skeptical, brilliant, beautiful part of you. The way you challenge me. The way you see through my defenses. The way you made me prove that love wasn't something you could buy or contract or arrange. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice." They kissed slowly, deeply, with the unhurried tenderness of people who knew they had time, who weren't performing or rushing or trying to capture something before it disappeared. When they finally pulled apart, Emma rested her forehead against his. "So this is real," she said, half statement, half wonder. "This is real," he confirmed. "No contract, no timeline, no guarantee. Just us, figuring it out, making mistakes, choosing each other anyway. That's terrifying. That's love." Emma smiled against his skin, feeling safe and scared and completely, perfectly alive. Outside, the city hummed with its million stories, some ending, some beginning, some suspended in the beautiful uncertainty between. But here, in this small apartment with creaky floors and second-hand furniture, two people who'd started as strangers, become temporary partners, and finally grown into something real, held each other through the night. And for the first time in either of their lives, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. They've found each other. They've built something true. Now comes the final test, learning to believe in a love that doesn't need proving, only living. 2 years later. Emma stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching Alexander sleep in the early morning light, and felt that familiar flutter, the one that still surprised her after all this time. Their life had become beautifully, remarkably ordinary. The design studio had grown. 3 employees, magazine features, clients who believed in meaningful work. Alexander's youth program had expanded to 5 locations, giving him purpose that felt nothing like obligation. They'd learned each other completely. His need for silence after waking, her need to talk through problems, the way they both reached for each other in sleep, seeking connection even in dreams. They'd had hard moments too, arguments that felt impossible, days when old fears surfaced, nights when Emma wondered if she deserved this happiness. But they'd learned to fight fair, to speak truth even when it hurt, to hold space for doubt without letting it become weapons. Emma returned with coffee, sliding back under the covers. Alexander stirred, eyes opening slowly, and that smile spread across his face, the one that still made her heart stumble. "Morning." "Morning." She handed him coffee. They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders touching, drinking coffee and watching dust motes dance in sunlight. "I was thinking," Alexander said, "about that restaurant, Marcella's. We should go back." Emma smiled. "Yeah? See if it's still as magical as I remember. Or as insane." "That too." He set down his coffee and turned to face her. "Emma, I need to ask you something." Her heart quickened. "Okay. That night in the rain, when you said yes, what made you do it? Really? What was the tipping point?" Emma thought back to that impossible moment. "You looked at me like I mattered, not like I was someone you wanted something from, but like you saw me, the real me, the parts I keep hidden because they're too much or not enough. And I thought, even if this destroys me, at least someone saw me first." Alexander's eyes glistened. "You saved my life that night. Not from my mother or the company, from myself, from a version of me that was dying by degrees. You saved mine too. You gave me permission to want something bigger than safety." He reached for her hand, then pulled a small box from the nightstand. Not the same ring from that restaurant. This was simpler, more delicate. A single diamond on thin gold that looked nothing like wealth and everything like choice. "Emma Carter, will you marry me? Not as an arrangement or contract, just because I love you, because I want to promise to keep choosing you every single day, because you're my favorite person and my best friend and the love I didn't know I was looking for." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. "That's so much better than your first proposal." "I've had practice." His smile was hopeful, nervous, genuine. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Again. For real this time." He slid the ring on, and unlike that first night, there was no audience, no cameras, no performance. Just 2 people in their small bedroom, drinking lukewarm coffee and crying happy tears. "I love you," Alexander whispered. "I love you too. Still terrifying. Still worth it. Always." They married 6 months later at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Rachel stood as maid of honor. One of Alexander's piano students played music. Margaret Pierce sat beside Emma's mother, and if anyone had told Emma 3 years ago those two would be laughing together, she would have called them insane. Emma wore a simple dress. Alexander wore an off-the-rack suit. When they exchanged vows, Emma spoke first. "Alexander, you taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing love anyway. You showed me that being seen is worth the risk of being hurt. You proved that sometimes the craziest thing is also the truest. I promise to keep choosing you, keep seeing you, keep building this beautiful, messy, real life with you, for as long as we both shall live." Alexander's voice shook. "Emma, the night I met you, I was pretending to be alive. You didn't save me. You challenged me to save myself. You showed me what real looks like, what love costs, and why it's worth paying. I promise to never stop earning your trust, never take your presence for granted, and never forget that the best decision I ever made was kneeling in front of a stranger and hoping she'd take a chance on something impossible. When they kissed, it felt like coming home and launching into the future simultaneously. That night they returned to their apartment. Emma kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch, pulling Alexander down beside her. "We did it. We actually did it. We did." He wrapped an arm around her. "How does it feel?" "Exactly the same and completely different." "That's perfect." They sat in the quiet, listening to the city, feeling the weight of rings on their fingers, new symbols of old promises. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd said no that night?" Emma asked softly. "All the time. It terrifies me. How close I came to never knowing you, to spending my whole life going through motions." "Me too. I was so scared of being hurt that I almost walked past the best thing that ever happened to me. But you didn't. You chose courage over caution." "We both did." Alexander kissed her forehead. "Thank you. For saying yes. For coming back. For believing in us even when it made no logical sense." Emma felt tears threatening, the happy kind, the kind that came from fullness rather than pain. "Thank you for seeing me, for fighting for us, for proving that love isn't something you buy or arrange. It's something you build moment by moment, choice by choice." They held each other as the night deepened. Two people who'd started as strangers become something temporary and finally grown into something permanent. Not because a contract said so, not because it made sense, but because they'd chosen each other every single day through fear and doubt and confusion and hope, until choosing became as natural as breathing. 5 years after that rainy night, Emma and Alexander returned to Marcella's. The same corner table was available as if waiting for them. They ordered wine and pasta and talked about everything. Emma's gallery show next month, Alexander's scholarship fund, their anniversary trip to Italy, ordinary conversations, extraordinary love. A young couple entered, clearly on a first date, nervous and hopeful. Emma watched them with a knowing smile. "Do you ever want to tell people our story? The real version?" Alexander considered this, watching the young couple. Sometimes. But would they believe it? Would they understand that sometimes the most reckless thing is also the most right? That real love isn't about logic or timing or making sense? Probably not. People want romance to be safe, predictable. Ours was none of those things. No, it was terrifying and messy, and the best decision either of us ever made. Alexander raised his wine glass. To reckless choices and second chances. Emma clinked her glass against his. To finding each other in the chaos. They drank, and their eyes met with the same electricity from that first night, softer now, steadier, but no less powerful. Because some loves are built on logic and careful planning, and some loves are born in moments of beautiful insanity, when two broken people look at each other and decide that maybe broken together is better than safe alone. Emma and Alexander had built the second kind, and they'd never looked back. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that love is worth the risk and courage is worth the fear, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that make you believe in love again. Would you say yes to a stranger's proposal if you knew it would change your life forever? Would you choose courage over caution? Some riches can't be bought. Some moments can't be planned, and some loves can only be chosen again and again until choosing becomes the greatest wealth of all.